welcome back to Grim and Whim. Today we will be diving into one of the most haunted sites in the United States, and is also considered one of the evilest and creepiest places to visit. Nicknamed the Prison of Horrors, Eastern State Penitentiary is currently a museum, but for 142 years, it operated as a correctional institution. Imagine American Horror Story's Asylum, or Gotham's Arkham Asylum, and Eastern State Penitentiary could be right up there, with lack of care for its inmates. So without further ado, let's explore this once horrific institution and the now haunted remnants of the tormented souls that once resided there. Going forward, I'm going to shorten Eastern State Penitentiary to ESP since it is quite a mouthful, and I also want to put a quick trigger warning here, as the information in this episode will consist of topics such as sexual assault, abuse, torture, suicide, and in general, this episode is pretty dark in nature. So if you aren't in the right mindset for this information, please be kind to your mind, and I will see you in the next one. ESP opened its doors in 1829 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and it operated as a prison for men, women, and children from 1829 until 1971. Its Gothic revival style is gorgeous to look at. It's one of my favorite types of architecture, that Gothic revival style. But inside the prison walls are just unspeakable horrors. Nowadays, it is unimaginable to jail men, women, children, and criminals with crimes from simple theft to cold-blooded murder. And unsurprisingly, the more vulnerable people in this prison were taken advantage of. Sexual assault, including rape, were unfortunately very common, and the jailers didn't really make much of an effort to prevent or stop this from happening. Over the 142 years in which the building operated as a prison, around 85,000 people resided in its tomb-like prison cells, including infamous bank robber Slick Willie Sutton and one of the most notorious American gangsters, Scarface Al Capone. Food, clothing, and heat was not considered essential or necessary for the prisoners, and it wasn't uncommon that they would die from starvation, hypothermia, or going insane. The moment you stepped into this prison, you were no longer a person. Whether you were a full-grown man or a child, you were given a number and stripped of your identity. A hood was placed over each prisoner's head as they were led into the prison. Prisoners were fed through a slot in the door and were often not fed adequately. They were locked in their cells for the entire day and only given about a half an hour to exercise. Prisoners were not allowed to speak, sing, hum, whisper, and some were gagged with a metal tongue clamp if they didn't abide by these rules. This prison has become infamous for the torture methods that they put these prisoners through, and some of the other torture methods that were commonly practiced were inmates being dunked into bathwater and then hung out on a wall during winter so that ice would form on their skin. There was also the mad chair, which was designed to bind an inmate so tightly that the circulation was cut off, and this often also resulted in their limbs needing to be amputated. The iron gag was another method that sort of seems like a device that Jigsaw would crudely MacGyver and saw. An inmate's hands were tied behind their back and strapped to an iron collar in their mouth, so that any movement caused their tongue to tear, and sometimes their tongues were ripped completely out of their mouths. And the physical torture was already horrific enough, but the psychological torture was equally as demented. Some prisoners were sent to an isolated underground cell named the Hole, and these unfortunate souls had no light, no human contact, no exercise, no toilet, and very, very little food or air. ESP's gloomy and isolated nature and the lack of positive human connection caused prisoners to constantly be in fear of their lives and really caused them to lose their sanity. And understandably, I might add, between the physical and psychological torture and then being in a perpetual state of fight or flight mode, it makes sense that many people couldn't cope. And sadly, many chose to unalive themselves to free themselves from the torment. With these horrific conditions and inhumane practices, it's no wonder that the prison has become a hotspot for paranormal activity. Since many prisoners died while being locked up, many souls still linger in this building. In fact, very few prisoners actually left this prison alive. And so it really is like this large tomb because so many people did pass away there from either the horrific conditions, like starving, or the torture that they faced, or by the hands of another inmate, by the hands of a guard, and sadly, sometimes by their own hands. One of the more infamous spirits is that of Joseph Taylor, who bludgeoned an overseer named Michael Duran to death in 1884. After brutally killing Michael, Joseph calmly re-entered his cell and went to sleep, seemingly just completely unnerved and just not bothered by what he had just done. Visitors and staff have claimed to have had encounters with Joseph in apparition form, roaming the hallways. Certain cell blocks have also become notorious for creeping out people over the years, and one is cell block 12, which is known for echoing voices and the sounds of laughter. Cell block 6 has shadow figures darting along the walls, and if you go to cell block 4, you can expect encounters with ghostly faces. Many people have reported seeing a silhouette of a guard in one of the towers, and in general, when you walk into the building, it's already just a very eerie and uncomfortable feeling. And as you roam the building, you might come across the sounds of footsteps, whispering, crying, and the wails of the unfortunate souls who were tortured or left for dead. So is Eastern State Penitentiary, is it really haunted? Much like most of the mysterious and unexplained things that happen in our universe, it's hard to say. You may just need to check the prison out for yourself, if nothing else to learn more about the prison and experience one of American history's most devious crimes against humanity. I personally believe that in buildings like this, where horrific things have happened, that evil can manifest in spirit form. And that's just my opinion. And you might have a completely different opinion, and that's okay. I think that's one of the cool things about the paranormal is that it's not cut and dry, and there is definitely a good reason to be skeptical, and I think there's also good reasons to have an open mind. I think it's both and, not either or. And in general, I hope that you enjoyed learning about ESP, and if you would like to find out how to tour this site or learn more about the history of the prison, you can check out the links in the description box under sources. I did my research with these sites and they provide even more information that I didn't have time to cover. But with all that being said, thank you for listening. Be well, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.